Hello, boys and girls. Today we are multiplying decimals and percents. Review back at page 10, and in your notebook it will be under 521. I'm going to show you my notes, which give you the steps for multiplying decimals. So you can pause it and take notes. And here are the steps right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a few examples. All right, we are going to start with example 1. Which is 2/10 times 3/10. If we were adding or subtracting, we would just bring this decimal down, but we're not adding or subtracting, we're multiplying. When you multiply, we'll just do the example right now. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 0 is 0, so we don't even really need to write that there, but we can. Then what we need to do, well, actually we are going to need to, is you are counting the number of places that there are to the right of both decimals, okay? So 1, 2. Then you're going to start on the right-hand side of your product, and you're going to move the decimal that many times to the left. In this case, it's 2 times. 1, 2. And I always recommend starting here, drawing it, and then put this little tail down here so you know where the decimal landed, okay? And then I do need to hold my ones place with a 0, okay? So our answer is 6/100. If we just brought the decimal straight down, you can see that we would get the result 6/10, because the decimal would be in a different place, and that would not be accurate. That would be an inaccurate answer. So it's really important that you follow these steps to multiply decimals. Let's go ahead and do example 2. 1 7/10 times 3/100. Now you don't need to line up the decimals when you are writing this down. In fact, in the example in the book, it doesn't even line them up. So let's just go ahead. It just doesn't matter. So let's just go ahead and multiply as we normally would, and then we'll deal with the decimals at the end. 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 1 is 1, plus 2 is 5. You could do a placeholder here if you wanted to, but this all is going to be 0, so I just don't even need to continue. Okay, now I'm going to count the numbers to the right of the decimals. Let's see how many places there are. 1, 2, 3. And if you underline them, then hopefully you won't make any mistakes. We're going to start to the right. We're going to move the decimal 3 times to the left. 1, 2, 3. Tail at the end. You can see that you need a 0 here to hold the 10ths place, and a 0 to hold the ones place as well. So our result is 51/1000. Circle the answer. Okay, and let's go ahead and do example 3. Example 3 deals with a percent. So we're going to calculate 17% of 32 5/10. We're doing this without using a calculator. Now, when we calculate percent, we can't multiply a percent times a decimal. We have to make them both decimals. And how do you make a percent into a decimal? It's actually really easy. Percent says hundredths. I'll say that again. Percent says hundredths, and that's also what it means. And look, it kind of looks like 100, doesn't it? 1 and 2 zeros, hundredths. So this is 17/100. And when I write that as a decimal, I'm going to write, here's the 10ths place, here's the 100ths place, and that 17/100 is going to end in the 100ths place. That's 17/100, which is the exact same as 17%. The word of in math means multiply. Always, pretty much always. And then we have 32 5/10. So now we have a problem that we can do. Okay, we have I'd rather put my 32 and 5/10 on the top, so that's what I'm going to do. 32 and 5/10 times 1700ths. See, I'm not lining up my decimals because I'm not bringing down the decimal. That's for addition and subtraction. Let's go ahead and multiply. 7 times 5 is 35. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 3 is 17. 7 times 3 is 21, plus 1 is 22. Okay, I'm going to cross out what I've carried because I don't want to get confused next time. I'm going to need to put a placeholder right here. And now 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. I'm going to add those together. 5, 12, 5, and 5. Okay, let's count how many places there are to the right of the decimals, both of them. 1, 2, 3. Let's start at the right, move to the left. 1, 2, 3. A tail right there so we know where our decimal landed. 5 and 525 thousandths. That's our result. Okay, so the thing that you have to remember when you're multiplying by percents is that percent says hundredths. And I will write that right here. So then if you hear it, 1700ths, then you know you can just put it in decimal form. You could also write it as a fraction. You don't need it as a fraction for this purpose, but it's the same thing, okay? Of means multiply. And then let's also make sure that this makes sense. 17% of 32 and a half. You know that's going to be less than 32 and a half, quite a bit less because it's 17%, right? Which is not close to 100%. So 5 and 525 thousandths, that makes sense to me. And I always want to make sure that my result makes sense.